All right, everyone. Ready to dive into some really cool AI research?
Always.
Awesome. So today we're looking at this paper called LLaVA O1, Let Vision Language Models Reason Step by Step.
Okay, that's a pretty interesting title.
Right, and it really gets at the heart of what the researchers are trying to do here. It's all about making vision language models reason in a more structured step-by-step way, kind of like OpenAI's O1.
I see. So, like, instead of those weird leaps in logic we sometimes see with VLMs.
Yeah, exactly. Like less of the black box, more transparency in how they arrive at answers.
Oh, and it mentions a team from Peking University, Tsinghua University, Alibaba Damo Academy, and Lehigh University.
They've really assembled like a dream team for this.
Definitely. And it makes sense because getting VLMs to reason reliably is a huge challenge in the field right now.
Absolutely.
Mm.
I mean, think about it. If we want to trust these models with complex tasks, we need to be able to understand their reasoning process.
Right. Like, we can't just accept an answer without knowing how they got there.
Exactly. And that's where LLVO1 comes in. The paper actually shows how a base llama model struggles with this in figure 2, I think.
Yes, in figure 2. They contrast it with Oliveo 1, which breaks down the same problem step by step, almost like a human expert would.
That's so cool. So how does LVO1 actually achieve this? They talk about these 4 reasoning stages: summary, caption, reasoning, and conclusion. It's like the model is thinking out loud.
Yeah, it is. And it makes the whole process so much more transparent. Like, summary sets the stage, outlines the problem and the approach.
Got it. Makes sense.
Then, caption describes any visuals involved. Then, reasoning is where the magic happens. It lays out its logic step by step.
Okay, so that's where we see that clear, structured reasoning.
Yep. And finally, conclusion wraps it up with a nice, concise answer.
Elegant. But I'm curious, how did they even train LVO1 to reason this way? Most existing VQA datasets don't have those detailed reasoning steps, do they?
You're totally right. They actually had to create a new data set called LLaVA 01 100K.
Wow, a whole new dataset. What's in it?
It's pretty amazing. They took existing VQA questions and used GPT-4o to generate those missing reasoning steps.
Hold on, so they used one AI powerhouse to train another.
Exactly. Isn't that wild?
That is really wild.
And they pulled from a mix of data sets. You've got your general VQA ones like ShareGPT-4V, ChartQA, AOKVQA, and then they threw in some curveballs
Oh, like what?
like AI2D and ScienceQA.
Whoa, science focus. That's hardcore.
Right, putting Eleveo one's reasoning to the test. They even use PISC for social understanding and GeoQA Plus for geometric reasoning.
They really covered all the bases. This dataset sounds like a gold mine for researchers.
Oh, and get this, they're releasing it publicly, so anyone listening can check it out.
That's fantastic. Now, there's also this stage-level beam search technique they use.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
What exactly is that? Is that like a type of inference time scaling?
It is. Think of it like, imagine you're writing a paper and you go through multiple drafts to really polish your argument.
Yeah, I get that.
Well, stage-level beam search is similar. LVO 1 generates multiple drafts of responses at each stage, then picks the best one to move forward with.
Ah, so it's like a built-in quality control check at each step of the reasoning process.
Exactly, and make sure the reasoning stays focused and coherent.
So cool. But I'm curious, how does it actually work in practice?
Okay, so at each stage, like summary or reasoning, LoveIO 1 doesn't just come up with one answer, it generates several possible responses, then evaluates them.
Evaluates them. How?
Yeah, like a little internal editor, checking for logic, consistency, relevance. Then it picks the one that makes the most sense to move on to the next stage.
That's super clever. And it seems way more efficient than just generating one long stream of thought and hoping for the best.
Totally. Stage-level beam search really seems to be key to LoveIO 1's impressive performance.
Speaking of which, how does it actually stack up against other models?
Well, they tested on like 6 different multimodal reasoning benchmarks, really tough ones, like MM-Star, MM-Bench, MM-Vet, MathVista, the whole gang.
I've heard of some of those. They're not easy to crack.
And LVO 1 consistently outperformed the base Llama model across the board.
Not surprising.
Mm.
But did they compare it to any of the big players out there?
They did. And this is the really exciting part. LVO 1 actually surpassed the performance of much larger closed-source models like Gemini 1.5 Pro and GPT-4 Mini on certain tasks.
Wow, seriously?
Yeah, that's huge.
That is massive. And it was all done with a relatively small data set and this elegant, structured reasoning approach.
Right. It's showing us a whole new path for developing more reliable, more trustworthy VLMs. And just maybe, it's a glimpse into the future of how AI might reason.
I'm totally with you there. This is
Yeah.
super exciting stuff.
Eh,
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's dig into the technical details a little bit more.
Sounds good.
I want to understand how they actually implemented this structured reasoning and how stage-level beam search works under the hood.
Me too.
Let's unpack it further.
Let's do it. Welcome back. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of LLaVA 01. They start with the Llama 3.2 vision model, right?
Okay, a solid foundation.
But the real magic is in how they fine-tuned it. They trained it specifically on that LLaVA 01 100K dataset we talked about.
Right, the one with all those GPT-4o generated reasoning steps.
Yep, full parameter fine-tuning, and get this, they did it all on just a single node with 8 H100 GPUs.
That's pretty impressive considering the results.
Right, super efficient.
But how do they actually use that data set to teach the model to reason in those distinct stages?
It all comes down to how the data is structured. Like, remember those 4 stages? Summary, caption, reasoning, conclusion.
Yeah, the thinking out loud steps,
Well, each stage is clearly tagged in the data.
like labeled.
Exactly, like headings in a document almost.
Ah, so they're giving the model explicit signals about which part of the reasoning process it's looking at.
Exactly. That structure helps LLaVA 1 understand the different phases and how they fit together, like learning the steps to a dance routine.
Okay, that makes sense. So during training, the model is basically learning to predict what comes next in the sequence, including those stage tags.
You got it. And because it sees so many examples of this well-structured reasoning, it learns to generate responses that follow the same kind of logical flow.
Learning by example. Very cool.
Right, so then when you bring in stage-level beam search during inference,
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
totally, that's what takes LLaVA 01 from like a trained model to a real reasoning machine.
Okay, so it's taking those learned steps and turning them into a process, not just a static set of rules.
Exactly. So during inference, when it's faced with a new problem, it uses stage-level beam search to explore all sorts of different reasoning paths, like brainstorming different solutions.
Oh, so it's not just blindly following one sequence.
Nope, it's trying out different options at each stage. So at each stage, remember, it generates multiple potential responses. Summaries, captions, reasoning steps, conclusions.
Like multiple drafts.
Then it evaluates them all.
Okay, but how does it decide which ones are the best?
Well, the paper doesn't get into every detail, but we can make some good guesses.
Like what?
It's probably checking if the response makes sense based on what came before.
So keeping things consistent.
And if the response is plausible, does it fit with what we know about the real world?
That's important. Hallucinations are no good.
And of course, is it relevant to the actual question being asked?
That internal editor is working overtime.
It has to. That's what makes stage-level beam search so powerful. It's carefully picking the best ideas at each step.
I can see why that would lead to better performance. You mentioned other methods like best of n and sentence-level beam search. How does stage-level compare?
Yeah, they actually compared them on MMVet, which is a really tough benchmark.
Yeah,
Stage-level beam search blew the others out of the water.
so it's the clear winner. Why is that?
Well, best of n is kind of brute force. Generate a ton of answers and pick the best.
Hope you get lucky.
Yeah, and it can be computationally expensive.
And sentence-level beam search.
It looks at multiple sentences at each step, which is good, but it can get lost in the weeds and miss the big picture.
So stage level finds that balance. Efficient because it focuses on evaluating at each stage. Accurate because it keeps everything coherent.
That's it. Really smart way to guide the reasoning process.
Okay, this is all super technical. If we were to explain this to someone who's not an AI expert, what's the takeaway message about LLaVA 01?
I'd say it's a new kind of AI that can not only understand what it sees in images, but can also reason about those images like a human would.
Not just recognizing objects, but understanding relationships and drawing conclusions.
And it does it in this really structured, transparent way. It breaks down its thought process step by step.
Easy to follow.
Right, like it can explain how it got to the answer, which makes it more trustworthy.
That's so important. Okay, all of this is super exciting, but as AI folks, we have to think about responsible development. With LLaVA 1 being so capable, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, that's a huge question. As AI gets more powerful, we got to make sure it's used ethically, for good.
Thinking about bias, clear guidelines, open discussion about the impacts.
All of that. It's a conversation we need to keep having.
For sure.
We've covered a lot about LLaVA 1, its technical details, what makes it special.
Really fascinating stuff.
Before we wrap up this part, I want to leave everyone with something to chew on.
Okay, what's that?
What's the biggest challenge or question we should be focusing on as AI research moves forward?
Good question. What do you think?
For me, it's explainability. Even with LLaVA one's structured approach, these systems are getting so complex that it can be hard to understand exactly how they reach their conclusions.
Yeah, that black box problem again.
And as AI gets even more advanced, that's going to become even more critical. We need to build trust.
Right. If we want to use AI to help make important decisions
Yeah.
in healthcare, finance, whatever, we can't just take its word for it.
Exactly. We have to be able to understand how those decisions are made.
And if something goes wrong, we need to know why so we can fix it.
It's not just about transparency, it's about accountability.
Making sure AI is working for us, not against us.
Exactly.
Well, that's a pretty profound thought to leave us on. I think it's time for a quick break.
Agreed. When we come back, we'll dive into some of the things that make LLaVA one truly unique, things that set it apart from anything else out there.
Okay, so back to LLaVA 1. We talked about what makes it special, but what really sets it apart.
Well, there's this thing called autonomous multi-stage reasoning.
Okay, what's that?
So unlike typical chain of thought prompting where you have to tell the model what to do at each step, LLaVA one can just do it.
To what?
It can go through all four stages: summary, caption, reasoning, and conclusion by itself, no hand-holding.
Whoa, so it's like internalize that structure?
Yeah, exactly.
And that makes
From
it that
adaptable, way more flexible.
can handle more stuff.
Exactly. It doesn't need specific prompts or templates.
That's huge.
Right.
And then on top of that, you've got stage-level beam search,
Oh, yeah. Can't forget that.
which seems to be key to making this all work so well.
For sure. It's that extra layer of refinement, making sure the reasoning stays on point.
Like a whole team of internal reviewers constantly checking for consistency, logic, relevance.
You got it. And it's paying off big time. LLaVA one isn't just beating its base model, it's surpassing way bigger closed source models on certain tasks, even with a smaller data set.
That says something about the power of this approach, for sure.
Totally.
What do you think this means for us in AI? What kind of applications do you see for this?
I think this opens up so many doors, especially for things that need to be both accurate and easy to understand.
Like what?
Imagine AI assistants that can grasp really complex instructions, robots navigating the world way smarter, even systems that could help with scientific discoveries, medical diagnoses.
That's amazing.
Right.
And all of that built on AI that's not just capable, but understandable, trustworthy.
That's what we need as AI gets more and more powerful.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, I think that about wraps up our LLaVA one deep dive.
Yeah, what a journey. I hope everyone listening got a good sense of what this research is all about and its potential.
Me too. It's been fun unpacking all this with you.
Absolutely.
To everyone listening, keep exploring the AI world, keep asking those tough questions, and keep pushing those boundaries.
Well said. That's all for the deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.